Welcome to UO Today. I'm Steve Shankman, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. Our guest today is Terry Root, Senior Fellow in the Center for Environmental Science and Policy in the Institute for International Studies at Stanford. Terry Root earned a BS in Mathematics and Statistics at the University of New Mexico, her MA in Biology at the University of Colorado, and her PhD in Biology at Princeton. Her research interests include how environmental factors shape the distribution and abundance of species on continents, the effects of climatic changes on species numbers and distribution, and the reasons for the attrition rate of women in science. Terry Root is the author of numerous scientific articles and is the co-editor with Stephen Schneider of the book Wildlife Responses to Climate Change, North American Case Studies, published in 2002. And she's the author of the book Atlas of Wintering North American Birds, an analysis of Christmas bird count data, published in 1988. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you on campus. So, on a personal note, could you let us know how you got from mathematics to biology to your current interest and really mission in informing the world about global warming before, I hope it's too late, although I'm not sure whether it is, but we'll start there.
Well, I actually think that a lot of life is serendipity. And what I did was I went into math because I wanted to learn how to think. I wanted to figure out how you think linearly. Then I worked on the Voyager project that went out to Jupiter and Saturn and Uranus. And I could take a class for free at the University of Colorado. And so I said, sure, why not? So I took a class and I had to do a project, and it was going to be on birds. And I had a mentor who had bird data on the computer, and he had no idea what to do with it. And so I went in and I started using it, and I got hooked. It's as easy as that. One project, I just did it, and I really enjoyed it.
So he had this data on the computer, so he was interested in birds, but he somehow didn't know what to do with the information he had?
That's right.
I
mean,
see.
this was a long time ago when we still had data tapes. You know, we didn't have PCs. We had data tapes, and he didn't know what to do with it.
I see. So was it an organizational kind of thing, or just different talents?
No, he wasn't a computer person.
Oh, I see.
And so he needed a computer person. He'd gotten this because he thought it was important, but he didn't know what to do with it.
How about that?
So that's what I did.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that what I was working on is looking at how species are spread out on a continent-wide level. And at the time that I was doing this, most of the ecological studies were done on an area that's about the size of, probably 2 tennis courts put together. And on a continent-wide scale, you can see how temperature and other environmental factors are shaping species ranges. But on a smaller scale, you really cannot see that. So when I started seeing how important temperature was, and then I knew about global warming, that's all it took. I just switched.
Well, it seems so strange that people would be this sort of narrow in their focus. That's the way it was or still is in biology, where people just focus on something generally very, very small and don't see the forest for the trees?
That's right, that's right. Because what they want to do is they want to go out and collect their own data. They want to make sure that what they're doing is actually right and good. And to do that, you have to have a fairly small plot in order to do it. Well, when you want to look at what's going on around the continent, you have to have other people collect your data, obviously. And a lot of people don't like that.
Right. So how soon was it before you began to get an idea of what it was you were actually finding out, and how receptive were others to what you were discovering?
Well, it started with my PhD itself. I was finding how important all these environmental factors were to species ranges. At the time, people were saying that competition and predation were what was really shaping species ranges.
Excuse me, just species ranges. Do you want to just let us know what that means?
Yeah, basically, species ranges are where the species actually occurs. And then you have abundance, so in some part they're higher in numbers than in other parts.
Excuse
me.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. And so I found that environmental factors, primarily temperature, were shaping this. But I was at Princeton, where it was the bastion of competition for predator or for species interactions. And I had a faculty member that didn't want to sign my dissertation because he felt as though I hadn't collected my own data, so I didn't know the data were really good. He didn't believe that temperature and all of this was important. So it started right at the beginning. And I knew how important temperature was. And I went to a meeting that actually Steve Schneider was speaking at, and I saw how important climate change actually is. I knew it was important, but I didn't have any idea how important it was. And it was on a continent-wide scale. My studies were on a continent-wide scale. It fit very well. From then on, that's all I've been doing.
So what happened with this faculty member? Were you able to were you able to work it out?
Nope.
Did you get your PhD?
Nope. I did, but I was very lucky because all the while I was doing my PhD, I would send chapters to a friend of mine who was a PhD at the University of New Mexico. And I was keeping him abreast of everything. And when I found out that this one person wouldn't sign it, I said, okay, let's go to him, and then he signed it.
So it was okay with Princeton to have an outside person.
Fine, yeah.
I think it's important for our audience to understand, sometimes this is the way academia works, that you know, you have these subject matters, you have people who kind of protect the discipline, and sometimes it's very difficult when you're kind of crossing new boundaries.
Exactly.
There's a lot of pressures not to do that.
That's true.
So, and that's part of what the Humanities Center tries to do, actually, is by doing interdisciplinary work to let some breathing space in. So, and that's very important.
But universities are very threatened.
Oh,
by
totally.
Interdisciplinary.
They certainly are.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of people out there that judge that something is really good by looking in the mirror. if you don't look like what I'm doing,
exactly,
it's not going to be any good.
Right.
And that's not true.
Yeah.
That's not how we push science forward.
Right, or other areas. So that is exactly what the Humanities Center do. You leave your jargon at the door, and you can make people angry because people get tied to what they believe and their egos are invested in it.
That's exactly
and
right.
it's not an easy thing. It's fun when you can do it.
That's right.
But you need the support. You need people to support you, like this fellow from New Mexico or woman, and to help you and move it forward. Otherwise, we'd all be living in the Stone Age.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the problems of the world are so large now that one discipline can't do it.
Right.
We have got to have science, humanities, everything. We have to put it all together, or we're not going to make it.
On the other hand, there is this resistance, and there has been this resistance to global warming.
Oh, yes.
And so you want to talk about that a bit, and what that resistance is, and how it's affected you, what you are trying to do.
It's been very difficult. There are a lot of people out there that I think are invested in making sure that we really don't have climate change occurring. And there's a lot of scientists out there, no, let's not say that. There are a lot of PhDs out there that will say something isn't happening, and it makes them very famous and it makes them very rich. And I think what's going on is that they truly are not scientists. I think what's happening is that they're more propagandists. And I know that's a very strong word, but there was a study done, and a man said that with double CO2, the temperature will only go up 0.2 degrees C. And I know that that's true, and the variability is going to be very, very tight around that. So, from 0.01 to 0.03, something like that. I went and I saw a talk that he gave, and he went on and on, lambasting all these climate models. And he says, we don't know anything. We can't do this. We can't do that. I went up to him afterwards, and I said, I really, truly am confused, because I was. How can you say, on one hand, that you have the smallest variability of anybody else that was asked, and then say, we don't know anything? Because that then, as a scientist, should say, you have the widest variability, not the... And he looked at me, and he said, because there are ramifications to that thought. I was shocked. I was shocked. To me, that is saying, A scientist now has got his values involved with his findings. He is no longer a real scientist. He's a propagandist.
And what are the pressures then that would move someone in that direction?
There are a lot. There are a lot of people that look at the atmosphere and say, look how big it is. We can't affect the atmosphere. There are other people who say, this can't happen because God will take care of us. There are other people who say, I'm never going to be heard of unless I start making a stink about something. And so that's what they do.
But when you talk about getting rich, I mean, who's paying these people?
Well, they're very well paid by Exxon and coal companies and things. Now, that's a slippery slope because a lot of us are paid by various people, and that does not mean that you let your values get into your work. Some people, though, it does. And so really good scientists don't have that happen. And it's worked. I've had colleagues that have worked on the Valdez oil spill, and they were paid by the oil companies. And they went through and said, this is exactly what it is. So it's possible, but it sure is tempting, I think, to some people. And that's a horrible thing to say about someone, but I really do believe that's what's going on.
Well, you do need to analyze this
Why?
Data and why it's coming about,
Exactly.
and to have a critical awareness of it, to be able to make the case to save the planet.
That's right. That's right.
So compared to past temperature increases on Earth, are we in fact heating up at an extraordinarily rapid pace at the moment?
Oh my gosh, we are warming so quickly. So there's two problems that are going on right now as far as plants and animals are concerned. One is the warming, and two is the rapidity. Warming has happened very, very frequently, in the past, and plants and animals can adapt to it, but it has to be slow enough so that they can change genetically, behaviorally, this type of thing. It's happening now so rapidly that they can't do that. The other change is we're here. Now, if you were a turtle and it's getting too warm where you are and you're trying to move north and you come across the New Jersey Turnpike, what's the probability you're going to be able to cross that? So we have, as I like to say, Kmart parking lots where all of a sudden, or farm fields, this type of thing, that these species are having to move through, and they can't. They can't easily. So we have these different things going on all at one time. So it's difficult.
Glad to hear that your Princeton education was worth something. You learned about the New Jersey Turnpike and how awful it was.
That's right.
It is.
That's right.
So when you say these species can't adapt soon enough, now you've warned that a mass extinction event may be just around the corner. So this is the alternative. If the species can't adapt, it's going to become extinct.
That's exactly
And
right.
have we seen that?
Oh my gosh, we have certainly seen. We have seen extinctions. The trouble with extinctions is you have to not see an individual for 50 years to say it's extinct. So it can go extinct, and then you have to wait quite a while. So we can't really say, yes, global warming has caused extinctions, because definitionally they have not. But the thing is that there are lots of species that are what we call functionally extinct. They still are around, but as the planet warms, a group of them are on mountaintops, basically. So as it gets warmer, if here's the mountaintop, they're going to be moving up like this. That's fine as long as there's mountain. But when all of a sudden it reaches the top, they have no place to go but extinct. And so there are a lot of species that are up on the tops of mountains that if we don't go in and pick up and figure out how to reintroduce them someplace else and take care of them there and help them grow, they're going to be extinct. So there's a lot of species that are that way now. So.
And this 50-year gap there is also pretty devastating, because most of us are not going to be around in 50 years to be able to see it, and so you don't really even know whether the species is extinct or not. So I guess, are there pretty good ways to measure if a species is very likely to be extinct?
Yes.
So we don't have to worry about that 50 years all that much.
Not that much, no. Not. It's technically there, but you really don't have to worry about it that much, right.
Now, you raised this issue earlier about propaganda, and the other side of that is being an activist. You're an activist. So what about people might say to you, well, you're messing with your data a little bit, so how do you, so the question is,
I know.
should scientists be activists?
Well, I'm not sure I like the word activist. I'd rather say an advocate or something, that I'm actually working for something, but not really throwing out my understanding of things and going above board. Well, I didn't explain that very well. But anyway, what I think is important is that scientists know what's going on. Now, we have an obligation to tell people what we know. And that's what the IPCC is. So the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, we look at all of the studies that have been done, we interpret them, and we put them in a language that policymakers can hear. And that is what I think that scientists who are capable of doing that need to do, because we don't have the luxury anymore of just doing and staying in our ivory towers, just doing our own research. We've got to get out there and tell people. Now, and am I going to tell somebody that they need to blow up a dam or something like that? No. That's not what I'm doing. But I am making sure that I am trying to get people to understand what's going on with global warming. And if we go up 2 degrees Celsius above what our temperatures were in 1990s, we could lose as many as 20% of the known species of the world. There are 1.8 or 9 known species in a million, 1.9 million species in the world. 20% of that, that's a lot of species. So I feel as though I know that now, the studies show that, and that's now what I feel I need to let the public know.
But let me ask you, why shouldn't there be, say, in medical school, you take a Hippocratic oath, why shouldn't there be a scientific version of that? In other words, you have a responsibility when you're finding things out to actually let people know about that.
To let people know that. I love to joke with people and say, I think that academics, the people who go into academics, are those that really don't have very good social skills.
Yeah, I'm afraid that,
it's
but
true.
the Hippocratic oath would help, though, wouldn't it? Yeah.
It would. I think we need to start teaching our graduate students, how to actually interact and such. We don't do that, but you guys do.
Right.
So why can't?
I'm not sure we do that in the humanities. No, I think it's a similar kind of
Is
situation.
Is that right?
I think so. I mean, scholars are not necessarily, temperamentally
Exactly.
suited for
talking.
interpersonal relations with the great unwashed or whatever.
Exactly. I agree. And if they're not, they shouldn't go out and do it.
But what I'm saying is that perhaps it should be part of the training for scientists in the ways in which medical schools now are insisting more and more on improving social skills, communication skills with doctors.
That's right.
That this is obviously part of the social responsibility that one needs to be very much aware of as a scientist or as anybody for that matter, and especially if the planet is as endangered as we believe it is.
Yeah.
So who still needs to be convinced of global warming, and what have the problems been, say, over the last,
well,
7 or 8 years?
Yeah, right. I think there are basically 3 groups, very crudely, 3 groups of people. Those that understand the problem and have got it and are on board. Those that don't really understand what's going on. Some people are telling them this, and some people are telling them that, and this, and they don't know what to do. And then there's this group over here that says, I don't care what you tell me. I'm not an evidence-based person. I'm more of this is what is going on, and I'm not going to change my mind. And those are the folks that we're not going to be able to change.
Right.
It's the people in the middle that we need to start hitting. And we've got to get the people the information. I'm an educator, so I believe strongly that we can have education that will help these people to understand what's going on. Nobody wants to know that the globe is warming, that we're facing mass extinctions. I don't want to know that. But we need to get people to know that. And how do we do that? I think we do that through scientists telling people and we need to have really good leadership who can say, I know we don't want to go there, but we have got to, so please follow, and I will lead.
Speaking of leadership, do you believe that any of the people running for president at the moment are capable of leading in this way on this issue?
I am very, very comfortable with the fact that every single one of them is on board with global warming.
You feel that?
I really truly do.
Uh-huh.
Are they going to make that the priority of their administration? I think that varies among the three of them,
see.
but they certainly are on board. They're not this group over here that don't believe, and they're not this group that don't understand. They really do know.
Uh-huh.
But now, how important is that going to be in their administration?
Right. So it's going to be a question of courage at this point.
Exactly.
And so, what would leadership look like, and what would a responsible leader be asking of the American people?
Well, first, I think they could ask something that is actually very simple, and that sounds very strange, but it is truly very simple. We can keep our same lifestyles, not change it at all, but we need to start conserving energy. How do we do that? Throw away your incandescent light bulbs and use fluorescent light bulbs. When you're going on...
But they're so horrible, aren't they?
No, they're not
They're
horrible.
not?
See, that's the problem.
I'm sorry.
No, that's just fine.
Aren't they hard to... They have a very cold... They throw up a very cold light. Don't they think we just have to get used to that?
No. The trouble is that when they first came out, and when you and I first got them, they were horrible.
They're better now.
Oh, they are so much better now. They're warm. They also cycle fast enough that they're not going to give you a migraine, which some of them would do for me. So they're much, much nicer.
What about halogen bulbs?
Halogen bulbs are better, but they're not as good.
So fluorescent is really the way to go.
Fluorescent is the way to go.
So are the light bulb companies resisting this, or they are?
Of course.
Yeah. So this is a big issue.
That's right.
So you have to.
That's right.
And so, do you think you could get a leader on board with this kind of thing?
Yep.
And the companies would have to adapt to that?
All the leader has to do is go to the companies and say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a competition, and you guys come up with the best dimmable fluorescent or something like that. Get the companies working together, just like they did with refrigerators. They got all the refrigerator companies and they said, okay, here's a X number of dollars, I don't know what it was, and whoever makes the best refrigerator that works really well with low amount of energy, you get the prize or whatever they did. I don't know how they did it, but anyway. And it worked, and it worked. And we literally have saved more energy by getting very efficient refrigerators than there is energy in Anwar. So by being very efficient, you can actually make a huge difference. That's a huge, huge difference. So there's all these little various things. You know when you your cell phone, you have a cell phone. You plug it in. Did I turn it off?
Yeah.
That's right. So you plug it into the wall, and then you plug it in your cell phone, and you let the cell phone charge. Then you go, oh my God, I got to go someplace. I go and grab it, and I just pull it off the plug, and you leave it plugged into the wall. It still is drawing energy. It still is doing that. It's wasted. It's called vampire energy. If we would just unplug those, it would save an immense amount of energy over the whole United States.
Should we be unplugging our computers when
We
they're
should
not
be
being used?
unplugging computers. We should be turning off our television. You know, in the olden days when we would push a television button and it would take, a minute and a half for it to come on.
Yes.
And now it comes on like that.
Yeah.
That's because it's on all the time. It just doesn't have the screen showing. So what we're doing in California is making it a law that you have to have a chip in these little black boxes that if it's not drawing power for more than X number of minutes, it turns it off.
Yeah, I think that's
automatically.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are these sensors now that can do that, can't? Are they pretty energy efficient? The sensors?
They're pretty energy efficient.
So this would be something to do where things would just turn off.
And how does that affect our...
Couldn't you get a tax break for no, I mean, couldn't the government give you tax breaks for having sensors in your house?
Of course, of course, of course.
So that's something.
Yeah.
One other thing we could do.
When
without changing our lifestyle, which I don't think changing the lifestyle is such a bad thing either. But
I don't either.
Yeah.
I wish that we didn't have Hummers out there, but you know, I would love it to be socially unacceptable to drive a vehicle that gets 8 miles to the gallon or something like that.
Right.
But anyway, the other thing that I think would save a lot is to change the way that we, what do I want to say, the insulation in our houses, the windows that we put in our houses, what kind of roofs we put on our houses. It's not going to really affect you and me that much. But if you put in these fantastic windows, then the house stays warmer. You don't use as much energy. The walls are insulated. A lot of walls in California aren't insulated, and you lose a lot of heat that way. You can get heaters that are zoned, and so when you're in this part of the house, it's heated. Then when you move to this part of the house, this one's not heated anymore, but this one is. So again, you're using less energy, and you're not going to know it. Now, do you know it for the first 3 minutes when you move into the other zone? Of course. But anyway, it's things like that that really are not going to change much. And we need a leader that will say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to go for it.
So in the 30 seconds that remain, do you feel that there's reason to be optimistic about reversing global warming at this very late stage of a catastrophic situation?
Yes. There are things that we are never going to reverse. They're inevitable. If we had started in '77, maybe we could have saved them. But there are things now that we can save, and there are things that we can work on saving, and we can save a lot of them, and there are things that we can. And we just go forward like an oncologist. There are people you know that are going to die, but you work with them, and you work with them, and there are those that you know you're going to save. And that's kind of how I feel I am, an oncologist of the world.
Well, it's still, reason for optimism. So thank you for bringing us that optimistic message.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Terry Root, Senior Fellow at the Center for Environmental Science and Policy at the Institute for International Studies at Stanford. Thank you for watching.